Yes, guys, welcome back to the instant reaction. Just like Arsenal's in possession performance today, my camera isn't working, so that's good to
I'm
add
finally
to
not at fault for technology, so I will
add
take
to
it.
the misery of the day. But hopefully, you can all hear me. Arsenal nil, Newcastle 1 at St James's Park. Wow, I've not felt this flat after a game since like maybe the City game where we lost at the end of 22-23, something like that, somewhere around there.
Mm.
Oh my god, man! How you feeling?
Yeah, no, it's a difficult one because I feel like even as far as the players went, there was a lack of uh, not even just impetus, but there was also a lack of kind of direction. Players got confused, and I think that we've been seeing that the last couple of games. The frustrating thing for me was I thought that the first half we showed some really good stuff in terms of our tempo. I thought that we approached the game quite well, kind of conceded the goal really poorly, but almost felt against the run of play. And then I sat there saying, okay, let's go for a response. I didn't feel that there was an issue. There was a lot of spaces in central areas. I felt that Trossard had a really tough game, particularly. But I thought that Newcastle was there for the taking in terms of central passes. And I thought, okay, listen, we get Ethan on. We're going to see a little bit more coming because the front two weren't operating like a front two. We saw Kai Havertz kind of dropping out, really being more of a right wing in the first half, not really attacking the box. And, Trossard was the one that I felt was higher, which was really weird. And then the roles swapped and we pushed Saliba a little bit higher up in the second half. And then when we go to the subs, I mean, I was really glad to see Ethan come on quite early, as far as Mikel's concerned. And but then really the second half was a case of I think Arsenal lacking any ideas, lacking any impetus, lacking any threat. And then we take off our only outlet, and it was a collection a day, really, of mismanaged role. There was a lot of people that I felt like were in roles that I didn't quite understand, and I felt like this performance for me felt among the worst in the season because there was really a lack of fight as what I could see from the players, and that's what I think really annoyed me. You know, and the manager I think is struggling for ideas right now, and it's kind of shown in the way that he does his subs. Very different approaches, which for me is really quite confusing. And I think it's translating to the pitch because I think a lot of the players aren't really sure about their roles right now. And I think we're not respecting some of the basic principles of balance here. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating to see, to be honest with you. And I think that the team needs to do better. But, I think that the way that we're approaching games isn't correct right now.
Well, I'm glad you can do technical analysis. I'm just I'm not ready. I just feel really frustrated, to be honest, at the team. And at Mikel because again, it feels like we've approached the game and not responded soon enough. I can't understand why we didn't change anything at halftime. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, what do you learn by those 15 minutes? And by the way, 15 minutes where I felt as though the game was getting more transitional, was getting further away from us. If you're gonna keep the same, it's not fine. But if you're gonna keep the same, at least put your foot on the ball, try and regain some control of the game. The problem was we couldn't break them down at all. But at least go back to the control aspect of the game. At least hold on to the aspects of the game that we think we can have with a Marino, Partey, every DM in our squad on the pitch. Like I just don't understand. I just don't get it, dude. And
I think what
yeah,
frustrates me for the most part is everything seems redundant. So, for example, to start the game that you've got three DMs in there, it's fine. And Newcastle's a physical team, but I mean, again, you're asking yourself, do you really need the amount of behind the ball players? Okay, fine. You then switch that things aren't working. The tempo needs to increase, so you start to add players that get their foot on the ball. You look at Zinchenko, you look at Jorginho late on in the pitch. You look at Ethan Waneri getting on. So you're throwing all your connectors, and it seems very extreme. And so I think part of the issue is um, when you have a team that's lacking balance, that's lacking confidence, because this is now the second loss kind of in back-to-back away games, really. A team needs to start going back to what they know, and I think that we're being too cute. We're being too cute about trying to introduce things that aren't working. Declan Rice, for me, had a really good game last game as a 6, and then in this game, really uncharacteristic things. I think his delivery off corners was really poor, as well. Uh, the role switch between Kai Havertz and Trossard, with Trossard being the one that's higher up and Kai Havertz dropping out of the block, was really confusing for an entire half. And then it switched in the second half, but far too late. It's another example of roles being confused. And, I have a look at why we took off Martinelli, who for me is the only running outlet. And we basically allowed Newcastle to get into a low block and defend easy. I mean, part of the issue is every time that we troubled Newcastle, it came from either balls over the top, switches in transition, and I don't think that we saw enough of that. And we added so many players that were ball to feet, and it became a sense of very boring recycling in the second half, with very, very minimal runs off the back line. And if you're not going to have it from Martinelli, then at least put on a Sterling, at least put on somebody that's willing to make runs beyond the last line. It just felt everything was ball to feet. And I think that's really the frustration when you're coming away from it, because, again, it comes from a lack of balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't understand the Trossard thing in the first half. I couldn't understand why he was our reference. Like, why is he our physical reference up top?
Yeah.
Against those centre-backs and against that midfield? It makes absolutely no sense to me. And he didn't change it soon enough. I felt as though Newcastle got out too many times down our right-hand side, their left-hand side. I think it was down to, I'm not being critical of Partey, because I think he was arguably our best player on the pitch, but he doesn't press in the same way that White does, and they were finding the spaces. That's on Mikel to deal with that. And that's how they kept getting out. I couldn't understand the approach. I couldn't understand why we didn't change things. The rhythm, that we were so slow in the second half. I couldn't believe it was like no one player wanted to go, right, I'm going to speed up the tempo, or it was just pass, hold, pass, hold. Like, no one wants to take responsibility. Really frustrating, man. Really frustrating. And also that they were dropping into that 5, and you could see the gaps as well. The gaps were central. I think you said it earlier. Like, you could see, and especially at the end of the first half, from the back, we were finding the spaces in behind. And that's when I would have had an Ethan Waneri from the start to go and receive those things centrally. So, yeah, okay, they're locking down Saka and Martinelli out wide. They're tripling up on Saka. But that means there's spaces elsewhere. That means you have to move the ball quicker. That means you have to go over to the other side quicker. Like, it just felt so toothless and so frustrating. Yeah. Let's come on to the individuals. Raya, I thought was fine. I don't think it was a fault for the goal. Honestly, for the goal, like, I'm not annoyed about the goal. The goal was a brilliant cross and a brilliant header. And okay, like, maybe you could say Gabriel gets slightly caught in no man's land, but that
I'm annoyed at Gabriel on that goal.
Bro, but you can concede goals. That happens. But like, if you spend the rest of the 90 minutes being absolutely useless, like, I don't think you can spend so much time on the goal. So I'm not annoyed about the goal. Saliba and Gabriel, thoughts on those?
Saliba, I thought, was our best player on the day. I think he was the only player that I felt could walk out with really their head held high. I thought he was really good in the press. I thought Gabriel was poor. I thought Gabriel, it wasn't even just the moment. I thought there was a lot of misplaced passes. He would get the ball, and there was a lot of wrong decision making. So I thought Gabriel had a really difficult game, but I thought Saliba he was really the only player that I could sit there and say, I feel confident that you've had a good game. And but beyond that, it was because he was able to break the press and then go beyond. But I think similarly, there was really nothing in front of him. And so did well to control things when he was 1v1 and isolated. But I think making Gabriel in the second half be a little bit more of our thrust was also a mistake. I don't know why that happened. I felt that Gabriel was pushed a lot higher and Saliba took a little bit more of a back seat. But that left-hand side wasn't working in general. And I don't think Gabriel was having a good game on the ball. So I would have rather had those two roles switched again. So it became a case of muddled roles, lack of direction again from the back line. But yeah, I'd say Saliba marginally better. Not marginally, definitely better. And I think Gabriel had a tough game for me.
We see all your super chats. We'll come to them in a minute. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, I thought Partey had a brilliant game. I thought he helped sort of evading their press in certain areas. I thought he was brilliant when he came central. He recycled when he needed to. He went forward when he needed to. He's in brilliant form, Partey. As I say, I think he was part of the reason they could get out down that side, but that's not his fault. He's a midfielder playing there. We need to account for that and adjust accordingly. On the left-hand side, Timber, I thought did okay. There was a couple of moments where Gordon skinned him, but also a couple of moments where he won the battle. So I'm not too worried about that. It was a really nice underlapping run at one point in the first half from Timber, which he was found. And yeah, it was frustrating that if that was a way to get out, we didn't repeat that, because that seemed to be one of the ways we could do that. I thought Newcastle were great out of possession. They were so energetic. And what's frustrating as well, mate, is they were so energetic, and I knew they'd have to sit in at some point. I absolutely knew it. They'd have to sit in because they can't keep that up the whole game. And they did. And they absolutely did. But we had absolutely nothing for them in possession, which is so frustrating. Coming to the midfield, who do you want to take? Rice, Marino?
I can take Declan Rice. I thought he was trying. He wasn't in the game very, very much. And so I think in the beginning, I felt like at least the tempo was coming really well from both Rice and Partey. So I thought he had a pretty good game there. But off set pieces, his first delivery was really, really tough, I think, all match. And then when he got switched to that number 8 role at the beginning, I felt like he had a really good run to start, which gave him confidence. It was really the only drive in the second half. But after that point, it was just him high and wide, and it was kind of a case of him completely out of the game. And so I don't think I can blame an individual here, but he also looked like a lack of impetus, because again, between him and Partey, they operated well in build up. But I think once we got to the middle of the final third, there was really an issue for anybody to be a receiver between the lines. And so I think both struggled. Marino, for me, I think he received well in pockets in the first half, but again, he was really out of the game. I don't even feel like he added more second ball winning as well. So I think Marino for me was really quiet. Again, not at fault per se, but it comes from this lack of balance for me, in which there's a lot of people not sure of which role to take. And between Marino, Partey, Declan Rice, even Jurrien Timber, which I think people are forgetting, like Jurrien Timber at left back means his angles are forced to the right. He's obviously right-footed, and so he doesn't have that opportunity to really go on the outside. And so you had like 4 players in kind of in this area of the pitch that, all are trying to do the same thing. And so it became a case of, both Rice and Marino for me were out of the game. And it was frustrating because we didn't have enough on the ball personality in the first half. So I can't sit there and say one person's at fault, but I mean, if you can see that, then I think these are experienced players. There's got to be a little bit of, you stand there, I'm going to get my foot higher up the pitch and I'm going to try to change things up. But I think everybody ended up being comfortable in terms of their roles and kind of trying to pass off responsibility. So it was really frustrating to see, to be honest.
Trossard and Martinelli, we've kind of Trossard and Havertz, we've discussed a little bit in terms of the role confusion and the mismatching. I thought Havertz once he did go there, didn't have his best afternoon in terms of dealing with the centre backs, but actually if he received the ball a little bit more, maybe we would have seen something. Saka, I felt bad for, because he was being tripled up upon, and when you're not taking advantage anywhere else, what can he do? He put a brilliant ball into the box, which Marino I think should have gambled on. There's a couple of moments. I mean, some of those half-space crosses to the back post, we could be sat here saying Saka saves us again with an unbelievable back post cross to go to Rice, and we're having a different conversation about Saka. I did feel the moment with Lewis Hall where his Achilles got scraped. I think that kind of killed his game a little bit, but then he seemed to recover sort of within about sort of 10-15 minutes. But there's a sort of 10-minute period where I didn't feel like he was taking anyone on. I didn't feel like he was brave in his actions particularly. I'm not sat here blaming Saka at all. I thought he had a great game, to be honest. But what can he do when there's 3 Newcastle players on him? We need to move the ball quicker, and we need to find players centrally, because there were the spaces and spaces in behind.
Well, I just think we didn't do a good enough job of supplying our wingers, broadly speaking, throughout the match. And it's really frustrating, because I think despite the struggles, Saka still gave us our best chances, in terms of not just what you had mentioned, mate, but, even towards the end of the match in terms of that back post cross for Declan Rice.
Yeah, that's what I said.
which I think is a huge chance and a wild miss, to be honest with you. I mean, he's in space, and Declan needs to do better for getting that at least on target. And this back post cross was really frustrating for me because I felt like Newcastle didn't defend it well all game. And again, not to speak about the role confusion, but if in the first half you're asking Kai Havertz to drop out and not be the target, where is Saka crossing to? Like, I don't understand where the target was. There was just a mismatch of ideas here. And I know we didn't really speak of it, but I think Ethan Nwaneri got a lot of time on the pitch, but I didn't see him. And that it's frustrating. I think that comes down to a structure. Again, it really got to a point where I felt like everybody didn't know what to do. We kept going sideways, and there was a lack of ideas. Towards the end, there was this attempt to do some underlapping passes, I felt like. And I didn't understand. It wasn't coming off. So I didn't really understand that. And for me, it's really quite simple. When you see a game, you've got to play what's in front of you. And so when Newcastle go into kind of a low block, there's two things that you can try to do that. Either you've got players that are going to come ball to feet to draw your center backs out of their defensive line. We had far too many of those, so that wasn't really a tactic that we could do. But quick switches with kind of balls over the top of a defensive line, I felt like are things that we could have done a little bit earlier, a little bit quicker, and we really didn't see it. And so I think our lack of adaptation to the game was, again, another really big frustration. And because of this, I don't really look at an individual. I look at the manager, I look at our approach, and I felt like the structure was off again. So this was just not a really good day for the club, the players, but really for me, the manager struggled to provide a clear approach to the game today. So that was really frustrating.
Maffio, thanks for the super chat. There is no way we win the league. I'm so annoyed. Yeah, we'll come to sort of league chat certainly at the end. Thank you, Maffio. Benny, for all those calling for Nwaneri, hold your horses. He's not ready to be that guy yet. The players, they let the manager down. I think that match should be the final point on Trossard starting. I think on Nwaneri, like I do agree that it was a structural thing. I didn't think he could. I didn't feel physically he was a match for Newcastle, but he's also 17, so I'm not going to, in a different game state where it's less transitional for most of that second half. If he was given more time, and I think towards the end of when he was that sort of settled block period where Newcastle was sat back, he was starting to drop out and find a little bit of space. And there was a moment he had a shot, he wrapped his foot around it. There's a couple of moments, but it's going to take some time for him to build up the chemistry with Ben White, to know, there's a couple of balls in behind from Ben White where Nwaneri didn't know where to stand or where to run. And that's completely understandable. He hasn't played with them. So to have some time, the 2-3 years that Ødegaard's had to sort of build up a chemistry, that's when we see what Nwaneri can do. But what's frustrating is, say we'd gone with the Nwaneri project straight away, we could be sat here, with 6, 7, 8 90s of Nwaneri under our belt now, and a more cohesive picture of that. But we haven't done that.
Yeah, I don't know if I really agree on holding the horses for him not being ready. I thought he's perfectly ready. I just thought the team didn't do a good enough job of getting the ball to our attacking players, period. And Ethan's within that. And so if you're not going to get the ball, he's not going to do much. And
I will push, like, I don't think that's the whole truth. I think he is unable to impose himself a touch on the game because he's 17. I think it's okay to lay some blame at his feet.
I agree with that.
The question is, he's 17.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that because I think whenever he's had minutes, he's been the driver and the impetus. And I think this game is far more of an outlier to what he's been able to hold against adults, broadly speaking. Like in all of his cameos, he's the one that's been able to provide a drive, provide more impetus to the attack, and he didn't look out of it. Really, this is the only game, but I would say this is a game in which the entire team felt out of it. And if he was receiving the ball and then lacking a final action, if he was getting a lot of touches on the ball and then just miscompleting actions, then maybe I could understand where comments like that come from. But for me, I don't think I counted more than 3 or 4 times that Ethan Nwaneri received in the block and could do something in that second half, which to me, I lay blame more at structure. If you've got that and you're not receiving the ball and your attackers aren't receiving it, if you're receiving it and messing up actions, then something a little bit different for me.
Trader IQ, trusting my post-match gutted emotions with you. Thank you all for being here. Yeah, this is This is a painful one. This is a very painful one. Ivan Smith, we have a 42% win rate without Odegaard this season, and something we're better without him. Yeah, that's not a good number to put it bluntly. Oh, Ultra Pro Gamer says no SE refs, no major injury crisis deserved. Yeah, like we've said it. Like this is on us. This is on, and I would suggest on the structure and not changing it sooner. And look, I think it's telling that we've not gone through any player and said they had a horrible. Like people were blaming Trossard. Trossard didn't have a great game, but that Trossard isn't the reason we lost this game. It's a collective thing, which ultimately Mikel's responsible for. I haven't seen his post-match comments, but I hope he does take responsibility for it. Nathan Piper, we were all poor, so let's not bring any pitchforks to one player. I felt there were no legs defending counter-attacks. Stringing passes was difficult. I actually don't agree with that on the counter-attacks. I think part of this is playing away. There was a moment where Newcastle had like Isak and Gordon. It was like a 5v2 in our favour. And it was Isak and Gordon versus like 5 of our defenders. And the whole of St. James's Park is, and everyone thinks, oh God, they're going to get, it's a 5v2. I actually don't agree with that. I do agree with the second part though on the stringing passes because we were giving too many balls away, especially at the start of the second half, which is, you want to come out with impetus and you want to come out with a new direction, but that's got to come from the tactics and the application. It can't just be unfocused sort of energy, and that's what I felt it was.
I think fundamentally, when you have a look at a game, and again, these are all just initial reactions, but if you can't find a player, or you struggle at least to have multiple players that you think played well, and this is a collective thing, then you look to structure. And I think the idea that we're not going to bring pitchforks to one player is because we felt everybody was bad, and the players to the manager to the club. And so when you have something like that, there's just a breakdown completely. And that for me is the frustrating thing. Like it felt like, honestly, it felt like a training session. And that's the worst thing. There was a certain apathy that I just felt like we weren't going to penetrate. Didn't create really a big open chance, bar Saka's back post crossing. And that was the only avenue that I felt like we could create a chance. And that's demoralizing. When you're looking for a goal, I felt like you need to have some kind of hope that the team can vary things and change things up. But I didn't really have that. And I had this struggle in which I'm looking at the play and possession. It seemed slow. It seemed lack of urgency. And there wasn't really any variety to it. And we were hoping for an individual to do something. And I don't think that's a way to win games, really. So we need to go back to doing some of the things that made us successful last year in terms of making sure that our press, which I thought was kind of lazy today, by the way, too. I don't think that our press was very good at all. And we allowed Newcastle to kind of play through our press quite easily. I mean, they had some good moments, so you're going to appreciate that and congratulate the opposition. But I think from our perspective, we wanted to press man-to-man, but the application wasn't great. And so it left us really open out of possession. But yeah, it's just a really gut punching, kind of wrenching day because I just don't feel like the team did well. I don't think we did well. After the 35th minute, really, it became a case of things went off a cliff, where things were going really poor. But after in the second half, I just didn't see anything. I didn't see quick tempo, and I thought at least from halftime we can sit in there, we can change something. But I didn't really see any changes. I thought I saw actually regression from the second half.
McLovin, why did we switch to a 3-1-6 last 20 minutes and our between the line players are receiving outside the block? No wonder we couldn't get any progression. Yeah, it's always a balance, and you can't have every player dropping outside the block. You also need some bravery sort of between the lines to play those passes. I don't think our centre backs were particularly brave on the ball today. Yeah,
Well,
I mean, it's also
answer that. I mean, I think like you do this because Newcastle went into a low block, right? And so you're looking at adding another player forward. My problem isn't really adding players to the attack. I thought that was actually good. It was what we did within this, 3-1-6, if you want to call it. I just felt like there was a lack of movement. And there was a lack of, again, for me, balls over the top of the defensive line, quick switches into the back post, things like this, in terms of half space crossing, which we attempted a little bit later on with Ben White when he came on the pitch. But things like that, I didn't feel like we did enough of in the last 20 minutes. So I think it's just a response to Newcastle going into like a really deep low block. That's why you'll want to add a player. So that's not an issue. But I think adding players isn't enough. We need to create some variety to our movement, to our passing, in order to exploit some of these 1v1s, but we just didn't really do that. So it wasn't really a big effect about adding somebody to the front line.
Hamza says, Ode can't get back soon enough. We have no one who dictates our tempo now. Maybe play Georgie. Yeah, I think especially in the second half, that would have been one of the changes I would have made, or maybe even start with him. It depends on the midfield that they're going with, but obviously they went with Joe Linton as well. I did feel, and I remember that performance at St James's Park. I think it was season before last, at the end of the season, where Jorginho just absolutely ripped it. And it is that tempo setting. And I felt like Partey sort of did some of that, but ultimately he's not in the center of the park enough to be able to do that enough. And, Partey was someone who's willing to go back, who's willing. And the thing is it's not every pass, ironically, with Thomas Partey, not every pass needs to go forward. And I thought he did a good job today of actually deciding when to recycle, when to sort of reinvent things. And Jorginho, I think in the second half, especially with his experience, I think would have given us a little bit of a platform, a little bit of calm. The game was becoming too transitional. It's exactly what Newcastle wanted. I also think in the first half, I think I saw a stat that was 22 minutes out of 48 were in possession, where the ball was in play, which is Newcastle's plan every single time. And with someone like a Jorginho, he does take more time on the ball. He does sort of take his time with his touches. He does sort of pick things out a little bit slower. But you have 90 minutes. I think the frustrating part for me was, from the changes, we still had like 40 minutes to go in the game, or 35 minutes to go in the game. You don't need to panic. And I felt like certainly in the second half, there was some panic at the start. I saw Havertz, running back, sort of doing a bit of hero stuff, and I'm like, mate, just it's fine, like chill. I think someone like a Jorginho would have made an impact.
Yeah, potentially. It's kind of it's frustrating because I think everybody on the pitch, didn't want that to happen, but things just weren't coming off. It was one of those days that I just felt like I don't know if there was a tactic that could have changed something. I'm really kind of perplexed at what the idea is. I would love to ask Mikel what his idea was, because if it was a case about putting your foot on the ball, I think he attempted that with Zinchenko and Ethan coming on, and then Jorginho maybe a little bit later. But the attempt was to put more control into the match.
I don't think so. I think that was impetus. I saw Zinchenko was very, very positive. He wasn't sort of having 3-4 touches and recycling. He was going forward. So I don't think that was the case at all.
No. But you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. The manager put players on to have the foot on the ball. So the idea was he wanted to get a little bit more control and a little bit more tempo from deep. That's what he wanted to do with the subs. But
we don't know that. And from what we saw, Zinchenko and Waneri were going forward. They were very, very positive.
What do you mean we don't know that? I don't know what you mean by that.
We don't know what the manager asked them to do, and what we saw happen was that Zinchenko and Waneri went forward like really.
He's removed the outlet, right, and he's adding more players that traditionally are going to get their foot on the ball in order to add some more tempo at the back. I mean, you add an Ethan, you add a Zinchenko in order to help things in the back, and you push people forward. I mean, he removed Rice from that. He removed kind of the impetus on having Rice be the one to receive. He wanted Zinchenko to be the one receiving, and he added Ethan to hopefully come in and add some connection in the back, but we didn't really see any of that. And then when we added Jorginho, I think he had a couple balls over the top, but beyond that, there wasn't really a tempo addition that I saw from Jorginho. He was doing a lot of the same things that I think we asked Declan and we asked Partey to do in terms of dropping out from midfield into the center backs and then receiving and carrying up the pitch. There wasn't really any change there for me, but all three of those profiles, at least for me, screamed, I want to put some tempo into this, but I didn't really see any tempo done in any of the actions. So that was my frustration.
Dial Square, when do we begin to question where we're going? We'll come to the sort of the meta question in just a second. We're setting up in formations and styles not to lose, since losing Odegaard and relying on set pieces for goals and wins. I'd probably agree with that. And this is why it's so frustrating that we had such poor set piece delivery today. Some of those, the sort of, we had a couple of moments where we won the ball in the same place that we scored the Marino free kick against Liverpool. And it was really frustrating because those deliveries from that area, Newcastle, were so high. There was so much space to go into, and Rice didn't deliver those well at all, which was really frustrating. K Stacks U says, you Ethan haters, this manager expected Ethan to come on in this big game and make magic, like he needed to start and build up confidence. I mean, it's a balance. Look, you know, maybe you look more to the system slightly, I look more to the player, but ultimately we can't we can't expect a 17-year-old to come on and change the game. And you know, like he needs time. If you're gonna ask a 17-year-old to come on, you need to give him the 90 minutes. A 17-year-old can do nothing in 10 minutes. A 28-year-old can do something in 10 minutes because they have the experience. And which is why I've kept saying in every single lineup, if you go back, I said I would start Ethan, but Mikel won't. And you can't then expect him to come on and completely change things, even though there's things he can improve because he's 17. So yeah, it's really frustrating. Harry Scary says this is one of the games where having Odegaard would have helped massively. I do agree. In what way? I don't know. Creating, yeah, I mean, possibly the right-hand side in terms of finding a little bit more access into the box through there. I suppose the leadership aspect of things. But I mean, we still would have had the same issues, I think, in terms of access in the box.
If we were going to be set up and the approach was in this way,
Yeah.
I don't know if Odegaard would have helped. But what I think he does do just naturally is he puts people in the zones that they prefer. And things would have been a lot more clear about what they had to do on the pitch.
Yeah.
And so then naturally that could have maybe indirectly affected things. But in this match, I mean, there was a lot of transitions. It's a physical match. I just think that Odegaard will give you more clarity about how this team sets up, at least from Mikel's perspective. And that's what we're missing. We're missing clarity and approach. And so anything that adds to that, I think, would help.
We'll come back to the rest of the Super Chats in just a second. We'll just sort of give it a breather for a sec. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so where does this leave us? Let me get the table up. Look, a lot of people are saying, you know, that's title over. I'm not in that position yet. I don't think this is going to be a particularly high scoring season for the title. I think a lot of teams will drop points. I don't look at any team and say they are comfortably by far and away the best team. There's the table, but it's obviously really frustrating. I think by the end of this weekend, we could be we'll be 6 points behind City. I think we could go down outside the top four. Certainly, I don't know where we can get to, but it's really frustrating. Look, all the things that we've said before around the difficult start to the season and the injuries still stand, but we've given ourselves what I will say is a very small margin of error now. I think we have maybe 3 more places in the season over 28 games where we can even drop points if we want to be up there. But we have to see how the season plays out. That's how I feel right now. But you know, ultimately, we don't know what City and Liverpool are going to do, and I'm not writing us off as of yet. I think we've got a lot more in our tank, and you know, if it feels like every single season we have this sort of period of 3 games, where, as you can see in there, loss, draw, and a loss, where we drop points and then we recover. So I'm hoping that was the last of the drop points, and we can go on a run.
I don't know. I'm feeling kind of down in terms of how to make up some of these points. I think that we go on a really great run of fixtures after Chelsea. From an Arsenal perspective, I'm talking like there's a lot easier fixtures in general, and we need to go on a run. As far as the title goes, I don't think that you can make any title conclusions until by March. Personally, you have to be within 5 points. I think it's a lot to ask. I understand why people feel that the title's over, and it has a little bit more to do maybe with how we're losing, right? Not only have we lost in bunches, but the approach, we seem to lack an approach. And so it creates a lot more negative feelings towards the team and the hope that they can turn it around, because, you know, we're not talking about small things to improve here in terms of, the finishing needs to change. Certain traits, certain individuals need to change. We're talking the team lacking a lot of ideas. And I think that's not a great place that you want to be in when you're looking at now having lost a couple matches in bunches at this point and dropping points. I mean, our form doesn't look great in terms of a loss, draw, and a loss. And you can't keep losing in bunches if you're going to win a title. And so I can understand why people are there. I don't know if I'm fully on the side of the title's completely over, but I hear why people are upset. And I think with 8 points as a gap potentially, and we don't know, but if you do have an 8-point gap, I don't know. Has there been a title charge that's overcome that in the modern Premier League era? I don't think there has been at this point. At least I can't remember.
I mean, I'm sure there has been situations where teams have been, I feel like I remember Liverpool and City. There's been times where they've been quite far apart and then they pull together. I don't know. Look, I still think it's too early. Look, currently, what I will say is we're in obviously the worst position of the three. Clearly, obviously, that's what the table says, but I don't think we're the worst team of the three. Is my point. So I don't know. I'm obviously down, and I think we're in the worst position. But I think it's too early to call it, frankly.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think again by March, what you want to be is within 5 points of any kind of title race, and I think
Yeah.
that's the metric I use a lot more than what you're in right now. But I am conscious. I just at some point you're going to have to make up points. And the one thing I will say is that this title race is going to be very different because I don't think we've seen a Rodri-less City, and with all their injuries as well. So I don't think that we're going to be competing against the same force that's consistently going to win game after game after game after game. But I mean, by the same token, we haven't really offered any reason to hope really in the last 5 games. So I don't know. I think for me, I struggle to see how 8 points can be made up. But we just got to see where we at in March. And I think if you're within 5 points in March, you're able to have an idea of whether or not you're within a title race. But yeah, I don't know if I see us kind of getting there.
Come back to super chats. He's embarrassing. He's a disgrace. I feel like when did we last win at St James's Park? So we lost 21-22. Did we win
ground that we love?
We won 22-23, and then we lost 23-24, and we lost 24-25. We don't do well there, man. We really don't. Andrews Neon says league over, FA or Carabao has to be the goal, and CL hopes. Yeah, look, as we were just saying, I don't think the league's over. I think we're in the worst position right now, but things change so quick. Look, it sounds like you're trying to cope now, but we went to Bournemouth and we lost. If City go to Bournemouth and lose, we're 5 points behind. So you just don't know. You can't write it off yet. You can start to write it off when you're 6-7 points behind in March or April, but I still think it's too early. So I'm not having that personally. Anthony B. Silver lining the amount of tough away games out of the way so far. In my 15 years of watching, I've never seen an opening schedule for us like this. I do agree with this. We've had to go away to City. We've had Liverpool at ours. We've had to go away to Villa. We've had to go away to Newcastle. We've had to go away to Spurs. We've had some big away games. All the sort of away games, obviously City, but then I think what's left of the sort of top sort of 10 away games, United, Liverpool, who else?
Look, the only thing is
answer that. Who's left? So we need to go to Chelsea. We need to go to Liverpool.
Yeah, it's just Chelsea, Anfield, and I mean we've got the Etihad out of the way. So
And
I mean
United.
those are, yeah. I think that's it, really, to be honest with you, as far as the top 6 goes. But
that's 3 of those away fixtures in 28 games. So I think we've had them quite fairly.
Trafford, we haven't been there, right?
No, yeah. So yeah, Chelsea, Liverpool, and United, but that's 3 of those sort of big away fixtures, which I think we've laid out.
I think the frustrating thing is that we've dropped points in games outside the top 6. That's the frustrating thing for me. Context as far as Brighton went, but Bournemouth, and I would even say this Newcastle performance is a frustration for me, especially in the context of how Newcastle were performing. They haven't won a game since September. So the frustrating thing is we've lost a majority of the points there as opposed to the top 6. I actually ironically feel that Arsenal perform better against better opposition. So I'm less worried about that.
Yeah.
It's just, I feel like we seem to lose in bunches, but we also lose in bunches against teams we shouldn't be losing to. That was even the case last year. I think in December when we were doing it, there was the Fulham, the West Ham. Those were the games that I felt that the title was lost, not necessarily our record against the top 6. So I'm a little bit more optimistic against those teams. I just think that we need to get back to some basics. We need to get back to some normalcy, and just start putting points up on the board. As far as the title goes, I think again, I struggle to see how we're going to make up the points, but get to March and be within 5 points, and you have a chance. There's definitely stuff there.
I agree. We've also got to play Liverpool and City again, so K-Stack. So we never went over the top at all, bro. No running in behind, nothing. We had 2 chances to win the game. We are so lazy now, like it's so boring. Yeah, the going over the top thing was I didn't. I think Jorginho probably would have done that a little bit more. But yeah. K-Stack's imagine a chance Forest go above us. Well, also Bournemouth are beating City right now. So lads, you never know. You never know. Nathan Piper, we'll finish on this one. Good thing is losses can spring us forward. How do you think Arteta responds? Trust in the process until Odegaard comes back. Small but brave tweaks. Well, it sounds like Odegaard's close to a return. We can't expect him to be completely firing straight away, but it's obviously good news. Going away to Inter's tough. Going away to Chelsea's tough. But then, as George mentioned earlier, we do have a decent run. No one's saying this is okay. It's completely unacceptable. But this is the first game in a really, really, really long time where I felt we were like outthought and outfought for like pretty much the 90 minutes. I think probably the last time I felt that, I don't know, a long time ago.
It's frustrating for me personally, mate. Like I look at Bournemouth, I thought was pretty unacceptable. I felt like, that for me was a tough game. And then I felt Shakhtar was something where we lacked ideas a little bit with. And then, Preston was like a nice medicine cabinet to it. And then, you have this game here where I felt like we really struggled. And in the last 4 or 5 games, I just feel like we've lacked an identity to it. And I think the one question I'll have for Mikel is, despite some of the context about the struggles that we faced this season, what I think isn't acceptable is the alternate approach to an Odegaard-less team. Like if your idea that we should pin the entirety on a player and an entire team's performance on a player, I think is not acceptable. Like I think we need to have a much better alternative. And I don't think that we've shown enough alternatives in this period to change our fortunes with it. And so that's a frustration for me that you point to the manager to have a little bit better with.
Yeah, I agree. We'll finish there. Thank you all for being here. Dare we look at the stats actually before we go? We have to.
You have to.
I have to. It's only right. Scott Willis. Let me get these up. Oh, got some good news. I've got some good news, lads. 1 goal to 0, 0.7 expected. We created 1.1 expected goals. I imagine a lot of that was the deck chance at the end. Yeah. 10 shots tonight. I didn't feel like 10 shots, but only 1 on target. That did feel like that. Possession 63.8 to 36.2. Final third entries 57 to 21. Expected threat 3.4 to 1.1. So underlying numbers wise, we did actually look all right. There's the running XG. There's the chance for Declan at the end, which I imagine was most of it.
Yeah.
There's the 1.1 XG on the shot map.
We won on the one thing that matters.
Can we take something away from today? A simple field tilt win.
Not even simple
field tilt win.
Destroyed them. I think. Look, the only thing that I'll take away is I do think that Newcastle, for as much as we're frustrated with this game, they were limited to kind of poor chances in general. It's just the way that we conceded that goal made it just it was such a frustration.
Well, honestly, not really for me. The goal, you don't want to concede a goal, but for me, the game is not about Newcastle at all. It's not about this isn't a Newcastle masterclass that absolutely destroyed us. We were just terrible. Got 2 more super chats before we go. To be dependent on Odegaard for ingenuity is a disgrace. This should have been sorted in the transfer window. Arteta out, shouts coming, says Elliot Roberts from your neck of the woods, George. And Maffio says we will be below Chelsea after this weekend. Maybe we will. Oh,
yeah. I think we're right now. I think everybody's kind of just struggling. It's tough to do these match reactions after a performance like that because I feel. I think when I have some time to sit there and do a rewatch, which I don't know why you would want to, but we're nerds and we have to do that. I think I just need some hope again, and I need to see a little bit of accountability from the team and as well from Mikel. And I don't think it's just a singular performance. I do think in the last 4 or 5 games we've really struggled to add a little bit more impetus, and so I definitely think that I think that I need to see more from the team. I need to see the team respond. And whether that's from Mikel, whether that's through players, doesn't really matter who, but we need to see a little bit more dominance and authority. And we can admit when we get things wrong, which we've got it wrong today. But I think that we've been getting it wrong for the last couple games, and we need to bookmark this. If you have a hope of being successful this season, then you need to stop losing in bunches. You really do. I don't see a team that's able to go on to win the title that can continuously drop points like this. And so there needs to be a way of stemming the bleeding. I think Chelsea's a big game, a really big game. And it's a big game less on the points aspect, but more on being confident in our approach again. I want to be confident in us being able to dominate and create chances. I want us to be confident in us being able to say that our press is back to looking a little bit more cohesive. I want to see confidence in our play. And right now, I don't have confidence in the team. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing that we need to do and address against Chelsea for me.
We need a big response. Arsenal's lowest dual win percentage in a Premier League game in 2024, minimum 100 contested, was 41.38% versus City in March, where we completely sat in, and 42.9% versus Newcastle in November. It's the second lowest dual win percentage in a Premier League game in 2024. We need a response, but as Josh says, don't let millionaires kicking around some leather ruin your weekends. It is just a game, apparently. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, George.
Thank you, good sir.
Thanks for watching, and thanks for keeping it Arsenal.